throughout my life, like I've really struggled with the idea of being seen. It gives me immense anxiety. It makes me super stressed. Through therapy and life dealing like very specific hands, I've sort of slightly pushed away from that sense of anxiety and stress, but I still deal with it. Like I literally had for my job, I had to do a specific presentation in front of everyone I worked with, and it was really spur of the moment thing. But like I ended up bawling my eyes afterwards, like because it was so like I literally broke down in front of some girl from like another office. I didn't even know her like that. She was really sweet. She had lovely things to say, but like I was just crying because like the idea of being seen like as a whole individual for whatever reason. And I talked to my therapist about this, but gave me immense anxiety. Like that many people like going from being struggling to be seen in like day to day, like in elementary school, in school, and struggling to be seen. And then when you were seen, it was never like a positive experience. Then to be seen on such a, quote unquote, grand level in comparison to my life was like very grand level. And then having all these people have such nice things to say about seeing you in that moment, it's like, was nauseating. I know. It was like warming, like really sweet, and I appreciated all the kind words. And it was such a great opportunity for me to grow and find out, okay, I can talk to that many people on a stage. That's a skill that I have. Okay, cool. Now I know. But on the other part of me, I was like, I don't really want to be seen. And sorry, this is just a long way to say that that specific struggle I have keeps popping up in my life because I've definitely found out that my voice has a lot of power. And I've had times where I've like either talked to someone about like my own life experience. A couple of times this has happened where someone's been like, oh, you have so much positive energy and so many things that I think a lot of people need to hear. And I was like, huh? And they're like, yeah, you should figure out a way to like use that skill set. And I'm like, but ma'am, I don't want to be seen though. Like, so how am I supposed to use the skill set? I don't really, like, a part of me doesn't want to be seen. So that's where it gets a little dicey. And then it's happened. And then even in work or life, the times where I've used my voices and experiences where like maybe I vocalized something that, maybe I guess other people had in mind, but I vocalized it and it was okay to say it in a work setting or whatever. Then afterwards you get people coming to you saying, thank you so much for bringing that up. I was thinking this thing. And it's like, oh, there is value in being the person willing to speak, obviously in a respectful way, because I am aware I'm a Black woman. Like, I'm not playing any games here, but knowing how to vocalize in a way that people find palatable. I don't know. Anyways, that was a really long way to say what you're saying is true. I just don't know how to do that fully.
That's interesting. There are all these things I want to say. Even just that last sentence, what you said about how you feel like you just don't know how to do that fully. It makes me think so much of Chiron in the birth chart because it's like this strange sort of energy, this feeling that we have with whatever sign and house placement that Chiron is in, the energy of whatever the sign is. And so you just encapsulated that so well when you're like, I just don't know how to do that or be that fully. Because you kind of know, because it's happening and people are taking benefit from it. And people always take benefit from our Chiron placement when we're using it, I guess effectively. But I love that fully part because that speaks to the awkwardness, the fact that it's still a wound that needs to be healed. Like, that's just perfect. You have a way with words, a very tangible, essenceful way with words. But can you share about that story that you were speaking about where, you broke down crying and the girls there? Like, can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, sure. So I went on a work trip, and I spur of the moment. So what I do requires me to be like work with other people a lot closely, and the person I usually worked with had sort of rose their hand to do something, and I personally felt our partnership together as a team who worked together had made the conscious decision that if this person raises their hand, I'll do it too. because the person was like a really delightful, amazing person, but also someone who knows how to speak in a way that's so beautiful, so
Mm.
intelligent. And I've mentioned him before to you. I don't want to say his name, but you know who I'm talking about. So because of that, I was like, okay, like let me, whatever he does, I will follow suit in an effort to not only support him as my partner from a work perspective, but then also to grow my skills because there were things I was really good at, like I was trying to get better at. So he rose his hand, and
And if you could just like set the stage too, like what did like even if you were to like let's say close your eyes for like a second, like what image would you see in your head of what the space looks like?
okay, so we were having like a work conference thing. We were in a huge conference center. I think there was like 600 people from all over different offices would come together for the specific like I don't know if I want to call it like a work retreat or something. Anyways, in the conference room, there's a ton of people. Everyone got broken up by their specific uh, department uh, from all the countries. Everyone got broken up. So I got specifically broken up to like the creative section. And then they asked, they're like, hey, we need someone to talk about these three values. Who wants to do it? I don't really want to do it. I was going to raise my hand. But then my partner, Josh, I don't know, my partner Josh raised his hand. And then I was like, oh, okay, I got to do it too. Like, I'm trying to grow. And I'm like, okay, and then someone else raised their hands. And then we in our group they were like trying to figure out who was actually going to present the three values. Because I think everyone thought, oh, one person would get each value. But it turns out it was only going to be one person going through all the values. So then we all had to like give our own mini speech in that moment. And I like decided the skill set I've developed when it comes to public speaking, because I have immense anxiety around speaking, is to always build it around a story. And so some sort of thing to ensure that like there's some sort of line that I can follow without having to necessarily rely on cue cards and stuff like that, because it's not my strong suit. So I come up with a story about cake. I don't even fully remember it. It was something about like the tiers of cake. And they liked the mini speech, so they're like, okay, you go up on stage and you present to everyone else. Again, I didn't think I was necessarily going to win that. I thought someone else was going to get in and I was going to go sit down. And that's not happening. So I was like, okay, sure. And I remember like grabbing, we had like these paper boards where we had written our values for our specific department. And I remember like bringing it up, and I was there and I was just looking down, and I was like internally panicking. I was like, fuck, this was like a terrible idea. I should have never done this. I feel sick, nauseating. And there were like a couple of people who went before me, and I was like not listening. I would like occasionally look up and like smile, so like it seemed like I was paying attention, but I wasn't. I remember.
Why weren't you paying attention?
Oh, because I had to prepare. I was like, I'm about to go on stage for like 600 people. I work like these are like the founders of where I work. These are like high up people. These are people from other offices who don't even know me personally. I'm like, I'm about to talk in front of all these people. I can't embarrass myself. I actually can't. Like, I don't have a choice. I can't embarrass myself. So I'm just sitting there in my head, like, okay, cake analogy, okay, going through what I'm saying. I'm like, okay, what's the story I'm trying to build here? What's the through line? Okay, where am I starting? What's my middle? What's my end? And it's literally just so when I speak, I just follow that path and go for the buzz. So they called me up, and I went up and I grabbed the mic, and I was like, said my three values with my cake analogy. And usually, like some of my coworkers had said when I first started talking about cake, they were like, oh, what the going on? And low key, I was like, nah, I gotta see it through. I gotta see it through. So I'm on stage, I go through the whole thing, I get to the end, I'm like clammy, I'm like, thank God this is done, I want to get rid of this mic. And then I have a standing ovation. And I was like, y'all need to stop because I need to sit down. Like, I feel sick. Like, I don't want to be up here anymore. I'm tired. But it was so lovely because I had found out, because as a Black woman, we don't usually get opportunities and spaces to take up space. And some of the countries that the different teams were from were in places where Black people, I mean, let's be real, racism's everywhere. It's not going anywhere. But sort of like their laws and policies and the way Black people are treated are like behind, for example, we're in Canada. behind by like 40 years. So this was their first time seeing a Black person on stage taking up space. And I was like, oh, and I didn't have that context when I was on stage. I got a standing ovation. I was like, it can't be that serious. I don't think anything I said was that serious. But from the reception of the audience and even the person who was hosting their comments afterwards, I was like, oh, I guess what I said had value. Like there was something there that people connected to. So once it was done, I got off the stage and people were like, oh my God, you did an amazing job. That was great. Oh my gosh, such an amazing speaker. I love that you said this. And in my head, I'm like, okay, I was just trying to stay afloat with the cake energy. I didn't realize what I was saying felt that valuable. And the other thing is too, is when I do these like public speaking things, I like to throw in analogies just because it make it feel more authentic to who I am. So I think I talked about like the Real Housewives. I love watching that. Or I talked about stage. I'd made a note about like something about specific to someone being good, like just something you would know about it, and people really connected with it. And it was sort of this weird, nauseating experience. And just to say why that experience that was already heightened emotionally got even more heightened was that as I was talking to people from different offices, they were like, this is the first time I've ever seen a Black person on stage. This is the first time I've ever seen someone like command a room who looks like me. And I was like, huh? Like, I was like, huh? Really? And there are people like getting emotional and telling me how much it meant. But people to me were speaking like Portuguese, Spanish, that's all they speak, were like trying to tell me in the English they had available what they were saying, or like had someone come to interpret what they were saying to me. Like, and the amount of people afterwards throughout the day telling me I did an amazing job was like so triggering.
Why was it so triggering?
Because, in my background growing up, I was bullied a lot. I didn't have friends up until like, I wouldn't say I had like a really true, authentic friend outside of one friend I had through family. I didn't have friends, so I didn't have that until like grade 7. So I'm just in general so used to like being in the shadows. I also struggled because I have ADHD. I struggled in school a lot. So it was like all these levels of never being seen as a. And then when I did start to develop connections and find true, authentic friends, still not doing as well in school, or even if I was doing well for me, even if I was doing well for me, then I was dealing with like some other friendship, ending, or just all these sort of examples of people not seeing me or seeing me, but in a way that was like detrimental to me. Like they saw my skin color, they saw my like ADHD, they didn't see me. And obviously that creates a lot of emotional pains and trauma. So when all these people are coming up to me, this is the first time in my life I have this many people coming up to me to say, oh, you did a great job. I've never had that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I remember having an instance where I was in school and I did really well in a math test when I was in grade 6, I think. And I'll never forget. I remember this man's name to this day. His name was Danny. I never forget his face. I think I got an 80 or a 90 on math, and like, me, math is not my ministry. And I got like I was so excited. And I did it by myself. Like, I had to go into the IEP room to do it with like the IEP person, but they didn't help me at all. I did the full test. I didn't even have to call the person over to help me.
Hey.
So you know what I mean? Like as a grade 6, you're like, oh gosh, who do I do that? And then the guy Danny is like, oh, I bet she got help from the teacher's name at the time who was a part of my IEP. And that man took a moment that was so exciting. I remember ripping up the test afterwards and just throwing it out. Like, that's how the words that were always talked about. So even when I was doing well, it was always negative. So then as an adult, where you have all these people saying such lovely things about you, it's like, whoa. There are parts of me that doesn't really believe what you're saying. There are other parts of me that feels this is intentional. It is, but like in my head, I'm thinking, like, my trauma is like, well, this isn't real. They're just, saying this to be quote unquote nice. And then there's another part of me that's like, I've never been seen like this before. I don't know what to do with this energy. So sorry, that was a really long way to say, when I was sitting in front of this girl who comes up to me at the sort of like the finale party for this work retreat. And I was like, hey, you did an amazing job. She literally said, I don't speak English really well, but I just want to tell you I loved it. I started bawling my eyes out. Like I literally had to leave. I was like, "Thank you so much for such kind words." And I literally started bawling my eyes. I'm just telling her like I'm freaking out. Like I don't know what to do with all this energy. And I was like, "I'm so sorry. You're so lovely." And then I walked out and I called my friend, my friend Asha, and I was like, "Hey, I called multiple friends. Asha was the one who picked up because her schedule's a little more different. Most people were sleeping at the time because technically it was like I think close to 1 in Canada. So I called my friend and I was like, "Hey, I'm freaking out," and I had to unpack and tell her everything. And that was sort of that whole story. That's why that whole thing sort of showcased to me that, although clearly I have talent for this, there's something about it that just makes me feel extremely anxious and uncomfortable.
It's so beautiful, though. It's very, very beautiful. It's like it's like, because I think of Venus, like they saw your beauty, you know, um, and it's just interesting. It's just a very it's interesting the way that you speak about the sort of experience of being, I guess, yeah, like a Black woman who has ADHD. But something that I loved about is that you were saying that people, it's like being seen would get you into trouble. You're like, they'll see that I'm Black, they'll see that I have ADHD, but they wouldn't see me. And it's cool because what is it that the people, I don't remember where you went to some random, I always try and remember the country. I say the Dominican, you say it's this, it's that, whatever.
Somewhere that was not Canada.
Somewhere that was not Canada. Beautiful. So in that country, what is it that those people saw, recognized in you, that growing up you didn't receive?
Based on the words that people said, it was like someone called me beautiful. That's something that I'm still working to fully believe in. Someone said what I said was so, it touched their hearts. The amount of people who were Black who were like, "Oh, I've never seen this before," and then proceeded to tell me in the country they never see Black people in prominent spaces or taking up space. I was like, what? And you're like, well, I was like, huh, sorry, what? You're finding out like being Black is hard wherever you go, but you're finding out like they are dealing with a level of discrimination that was happening in Canada like 40 years ago. That's what they're dealing with. They're dealing with like not being able to get into schools, like literal universities are not accepting these people or colleges because they're Black. Like, and not to say that doesn't happen. I'm not saying that doesn't happen in Canada. Just to say that it's not as obvious. Like, are boldface telling people they're Black so you can't come? Like, what? I mean, listen, I don't like hidden racism. I prefer my racism in my face because that's, I know you don't rock with me because of my skin color. I don't have to deal with anything. But that level of overtness in spaces that you would consider there to be some level of like decency or even shame, you're like, oh, so this what I had to say was important, but who I am is what means the most to them, and it's like that's uncomfortable. Like I've just recently, in the last couple of years, gotten comfortable with my melanin. I wouldn't change it. I love my skin color, but I've only gotten comfortable with it in the last couple of years. Like they liked the way I spoke. I never spoke as a kid, and when I did, it was always met. It was either in response to someone saying something mean or bullying me. Can you feel that? Like it was never in response. And even when I would say certain things, people would like call out certain things or the way I say it or the way I interact with it or something like that. So it's like, so not only do you see me, and this is what has allowed this moment to mean something to you, but then everything I'm saying, you felt some sort of connection to. I don't have that, As an adult, I've been lucky enough to build friends and family where I can have those sorts of conversations and be valued for what I have to say. But those are immensely safe spaces. That's why I can speak like that. In a space like work where you're like, I gotta dot my I's, cross my T's. I need these people to like value me because this is my job. I need money.
Okay, let's talk about Chiron. So Chiron. Uh, Chiron is, like, Chiron's interesting. I was listening to this astrologer, Christopher Renstrom. He had this incredible way of describing Chiron in terms of how he looks, right? So basically, Chiron, when you look at him, let's say you're at work, Chiron's by the water cooler. He's cool. You're like, awesome. Let's like go chat with Chiron. He's kind of awkward, but it's cool. I dig him. All right, wicked. So we're on our way. Okay. And we see Chiron and he's standing there and he looks like a dude, just a dude. Like, okay, great. But as you start getting closer to Chiron, you're going to see like these like brown, kind of hips coming out from his hips. You're like, what's going on? It's just like the slightest kind of shadow, you're like, okay. So things are starting to get a little bit strange, right? But he looks like a human dude, head to toe, when you think about the quote unquote normal look of a guy. Okay. So now as I approach Chiron, I'm going to start looking towards his side, his profile, and I'm going to see out from his back and his posterior is a horse's posterior. So it's like he has a human body, human legs, because we have two legs, generally speaking, and then the horse's body comes out, and then we see the horse's legs. Okay. When I think about a centaur, I think about Narnia. Okay. So Chronicles of Narnia, they're very majestic, super cute, galloping in the wind. Okay. And it's because they've got like their like 4 horse legs, and then they have their little like human body on top, right? Their little human chest. With Chiron, he doesn't have that. He's got 2 human legs and then like a whole horse leg situation happening. So he doesn't even look like a centaur, okay? Because centaurs, they would do their own thing in the mythology, right? He certainly doesn't look like a human being. And he's really awkward. He's like around the water cooler. He's trying to adjust himself. It's very awkward for him even moving. So he's a very unique figure in that he doesn't belong anywhere. There's a distinct feeling of not even belonging with the weirdos. Not to say centaurs are weird. Like, they have a lot of Aries energy. Like, they're very proud of who they are, right? But he doesn't even belong with who the human beings might deem as being the other. So where is he? And it's cool because then when we look at the placement of Chiron between Saturn and Uranus, Chiron's orbit actually goes into Saturn and it goes into Uranus. Saturn, like we were speaking about before, is all about the bounds of society. We were talking about how Saturn's like, okay, great. This is what we're doing. This is how we keep ourselves safe. It's very hierarchical and it's very accepted, very quote unquote normal. It's the system. This is Saturn. And then you've got Uranus, which is the antithesis to Saturn, because Uranus is like raising heck, it's all about revolution or rebellion when it's not as mature, it's different, it's strange. Uranus rules Aquarius, but in ancient astrology, Saturn is co-ruler over Aquarius, which is very interesting because it's all about structures and bounds, And so with Chiron, it's interesting how its orbit is weaving its way between these 2 planets as if it's trying to help us see the harmony between the self and the other. And so Chiron's very unique. He has its own unique special value, even though he feels like absolutely no one in the world understands. In his case, it's true, but in our case as human beings, it's not true. A lot of us experience a lot of the same things, but it feels isolating. And so when we see Chiron becoming someone so incredible and wise, Chiron was raised by Uranus, abandoned by Saturn, raised by Uranus, the god of Apollo. He does something so special in helping us heal personal wounds. And obviously there's so much more about Chiron, but I think that's a pretty good, kind of, it gives us the feels, Okay, yeah, but with the Hallmark Hall of Fame film, it was interesting. It was on the day of the lunar eclipse, like March 25th, I think it was, right? So these kids, they're African-American kids. And, of course, Hallmark Hall of Fame, they're really playing up, I guess, the accent of being very Southern. But in this story, it's also about how, you have this teacher, she's also Black, but the way that she speaks is, eloquent, I suppose, Southern Belle vibes. And she's a darker woman too. But you can tell that she has all this internalized issues in her heart that have to do with what she looks like. And so when the new white teacher, who's all, he got a spring in his step, etc., she's like, you know what, these kids, they are so they're so rowdy, if you want to teach them, you gotta, she has a bunch of like rulers on her desk that she uses to spank the kids. They're not going to listen. They're not very bright, but you got to really try and ride them hard, etc. This is the vibe. Okay. So as I'm watching this film, I'm feeling so inadequate. I'm feeling really inadequate. I'm feeling really ashamed. And because initially, as I heard the kids speak, and I'm just being legit here, I'm not saying this is a good thing at all or right or true. It's very ignorant and arrogant. And that's another, okay, we'll get to that tangent in a second. But when I would hear the kids speak, internally, I would kind of cringe a little because for me, it felt like, oh, they sound kind of like backwards, like, they're not able to really form their sentences. Like, this is how I felt internally. And so watching the film felt very uncomfortable for me, the first half of it. And I was watching myself, watching this film, seeing that I was reacting this way. And initially, of course, I just wanted to put it to bed and pretend that I'm doing my PC thing and I'm very accepting and, oh, these kids are wonderful, people are different, whatever, right? But then I started to reflect on it, being like, no, Roops, we got to see what this is about. Because that's the whole journey, me moving up here to live with mom. Something that I found has really helped is that I'm more open to actually wanting to learn. And I haven't been open to that in the past. I thought learning was purely intellectual. Even if I wouldn't tell you that I thought it was purely intellectual, I could say, oh no, of course learning is a balance of intellect and whatever. Like, I could say these things. But in terms of how I felt it was an intellectual thing. And so I feel like real learning has to do with being willing to listen, being willing to open my heart and see how I respond to things based on like my feelings, how my heart's responding, so that I can see what's working and what's not, what's valuable, what's not. So all of this is happening. And I was asking myself, like, okay, well, how do you feel? And then I realized that I felt stupid inside. I felt and that's the only word I can use because that's what I kept saying to myself, like stupid, dumb. That's how I kind of feel. But I didn't know that that's how I felt. But it's because I'd spent all my life basically masking how I felt about my intellectual capabilities, believing that intellectual capabilities are what matter. Again, if someone had said, oh, intellectual capabilities are all that matter in the world, I could intellectually say, no, that's not true. There's emotional, blah, 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 blah. But this is what I thought was valuable. I privileged the masculine energy over the feminine energy. There are different ways to learn, different, like feminine energy is more intuitive, masculine is more intellectual. And so, right? So yeah, like feeling that I felt kind of stupid. And, it's just because I've been overcompensating, pretending that I'm very, very intelligent and intellectual. So much so that when I was growing up, someone would say, oh yeah, you're really smart, Roops. Like, it always took me aback. I was always surprised, but I always felt so grateful because I was so afraid that I was stupid, because that's the only word I kept using. Stupid, stupid, stupid.
That's wild. Yeah. Okay, so context, I'm 2 years older than Ruby, and we've literally,
yes,
she hasn't been around as long as I've been alive, but I've been around as long as she's been alive. And one thing that's such a wild statement, because I have always seen you as super smart, like intellectually for sure, and then even now, like I think you have intellect and emotional intelligence. Because it was a little rough. The emotional intelligence was a little rough when you were younger. It was also rough for me too. We were both like butting heads, but it's because we were both, like, we weren't there. But I've always considered you extremely intelligent, and I think it's like you saying that actually sounds like ridiculously wild to me. Like, I'm like, that's not true though. Like, it's never been true, and that's so wild. I've literally, like, when people would ask me about you, I'm like, yeah, she's she's super funny, she's super smart. Like, I never knew that about you, that you thought that you were stupid. That's Bro, I always thought I was stupid. Like, I was struggling in school and also struggling in life. So that just speaks to perspective. But yeah, girl, I don't believe you.
Right?
Sorry.
See, but but it's also interesting how we can kind of see things for ourselves that we don't see for others. Like I would never even think to I know that what you're saying is that you had, struggles with school and stuff, but like I would never, and I can say this genuinely, right? I'm out here giving out all my dirty laundry. I can say genuinely, I never considered you to be stupid or dumb. Like it just didn't, because I don't know what to say. You weren't, you know what I mean? It was just one of those things. Like what, So, but I thought I was because of my own experiences, and like I believe in reincarnation too, and so so with this film, with them being these kids who are in black bodies, these kids who don't speak the way that I think an quote unquote intellectual person would speak, it was the perfect storm to bring up all these realizations, insights about how I actually view myself and how I developed this ability, I think over lifetimes, to come off as being very intellectual, to get myself hoping that I would get myself to believe that I'm intelligent. Because if I'm so smart, eventually other people will see that and they'll kind of feed that back to me, and I'll feel safe because being smart means safety. But in my journey with astrology and looking at my personal chart, I can see that. And it's funny, the first person to ever say this to me was my meditation teacher. He said, you are a feeling person masquerading as an intellectual person. And I agreed with him just because of my experiences with meditation at the time. I didn't think I had feelings until I was 18, okay? I started taking this meditation course. I'm meditating. Feelings are happening, right? So I was like, okay, true. Obviously, I have feelings inside. And I preferred that. I actually, like when I was in, I'm going to say my high life, the high point of all of that, right? It started to settle down, of course, right? But, when I first got on that journey, it was really, really like intoxicating. But I found that I didn't enjoy as much the intellectual aspects. I enjoyed them. It was fine, but I preferred when I didn't have to think a lot. I didn't really like thinking. I liked being and experiencing the feelings. That was the stuff that I really enjoyed. Like I just thought, it's funny too, because the only reason I started to study the sort of knowledge that I've learned from Meditation Center, like really sitting down to study, was when I started to lose those experiences. And my hope was that in studying, I could gain them back. I could understand why I lost them. So I've always used intellectual stuff to help me out of situations, but it's not my preference. I've only built up this muscle because of fear. So a long-winded story, but it just brought up all of those issues. And it's funny because even as I was watching the movie and I was kind of reflecting, I could see that I thought being intelligent had something to do with beauty and value. Like for myself, like somehow, because whenever I would think, oh, stupid, I always thought that I would like, there was this sort of feeling of wanting to push myself away.
It makes sense though, because I think culturally
Mhm.
too, like just the way we grew up and the culture we're a part of, like there is a huge um, reliance on quote unquote intelligence, and the bar as a culture is just extremely high in a way that I just don't think is healthy. But just to say that the bar is extremely high. So although I don't think either at this point in my life, I don't think I'm stupid. I mean, I subconsciously do, but I'm more comfortable in saying I'm not stupid, I'm smart. I never thought that of you, and this looks like something that you are also trying to like combat your own what calls it your inner saboteur. You're trying to combat that
Mhm.
too,
Yeah.
and then but it's so fun, like but the standard is so high that even you could have been like a straight A 95% student every single time, and they based on like just cultural experiences they still would have made you feel like you were not receiving enough. You could get a 99, but why is it not 100? You know what I mean? So it's
Are you
an
talking about
impossible.
parents? Are you talking
A
about
parent.
parents Nigerian culture?
I'm talking about Nigerian culture. I'm talking about our parents, but I'm also talking about like all my friends who are part of Nigerian culture have the same sort of struggle. So then, quote unquote, some of my friends who are extremely like amazing
Mm.
grades, yada yada, dealt with the same sort of standard. Like they were getting like 99s, 95s, you know, from an educational standpoint, and were considered still not to be good enough. And then also from a personal standpoint, like
Mm.
in day to day life, you know, like they were made to feel like they weren't as smart. So that just tells you like it's something that a lot of people deal with.
Uh, and it's interesting too. Like, something that I've been considering with myself is, huh, like I'm seeing about arrogance, and arrogance is the opposite of having a learning attitude. And I would find that whenever I'm in a place of believing that the other is stronger, smarter, whatever it is, more than me, I'm putting them on a pedestal and I'm putting them in the superior kind of space. And then yeah, then I have to be in the inferior. Or like when I was watching that movie with those kids, and I'm trying to keep myself from doing it, but I was doing it because it's a habit, right? In my subconscious, like I said, I believe from many lifetimes that I've built up because of certain issues. So when I was watching that film, I was subconsciously putting myself on a pedestal above these children and putting them in the inferior space. And whenever I do that, either I put myself superior or inferior, I'm projecting something onto the other. I'm saying, you're bad, I'm good, or I'm bad because you're good. And whenever I can have such criticisms, judgments about someone else, I'm judging myself as either being bad or good. And whenever I'm in that space, it's arrogant because I can't learn. Either I'm a victim or I'm awesome. Like who can learn when they're so sure of what they are? Like no one can, right? It doesn't matter if I'm seeing myself as being something greater, the very opposite. If I'm just so confident and so sure that this is what I am, then where's the space for me to learn and grow and hear what's actually happening? Like when I'm in a conversation with someone or relating to them, and where's the space for me to have regard and respect for them instead of making them into whatever it is I want to make them in my mind just to get me to, what's that word? Like support, further qualify what I've been telling myself for all of these lifetimes. That hasn't even been true. I'm just so caught up in wanting to keep my, fantasy, not even a fantasy. It might be like a nightmare, but either way, my fantasy or my nightmare, I'm just trying to keep it alive because I can't deal with the fact of who I might actually be. You know, it's like that hiding, that masking.
That's such a human thing. Like people deal with that all the time, right? There's the self you present to the world, right? And then there's the self that you sort of, people that you're close to knows. And then actually there's a self that only you know about. And it's like this
Mm.
weird, layered approach at life, which is really difficult because what you believe about yourself, 9 times out of 10 is probably more on the negative side. And it's not true.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's not true, but I think it's such a human thing to have to struggle with. Okay, how do I line up with how the people who care about
Mm.
me see me? How do I line up there? You know, instead of thinking so much less about myself, Because it's true, like you told me that you thought you were stupid. As someone who interacted with you outside perspective, I'm like, wait, what? How could you say that? Like, I don't even understand how you get there, right? But your perception of yourself is different than my perception of you. I think I'm
Mm.
accurate, but just saying, there's a disconnect.
But Yeah, this is making me I think in movies. That's all I think in. This is making me think about a movie called The Peaceful Warrior. And there's this bully character. I mean, he's like one of the guys. He's part of for whatever reason, at this American university. The Americans, like, they're really gung ho about gymnasium. What do you call this? Gymnastics. Gymnastics. Okay. And
Oh,
it's, yeah, it's the college gymnasts are the cool guys on campus. And one of them, he's like a part of the group, of course, but he's kind of like mean, but like, he's cool, right? That kind of vibe. And there's this experience that the main character gets because he's going through his own transformation, and he's able to hear the thoughts that are going on in their minds. And so the kid who the bully is always beating up on, his thoughts aren't very good at all, but it's okay, right? But when he looks at the mind of the guy who always is the bully, kind of, he finds that, because the guy would always say, "What are you, stupid, Millman? You," and then he would say some curse word. But like when he went into his mind, he could see that the guy was, well, he was saying like, "Oh yeah, just like dad told me, I'm stupid and I'm the curse word," because he wasn't getting like, some sort of gymnastics movement right, whatever. Anywho, all this long-winded to say, I don't even remember. My goodness, Rubes. Yikes. Lost the train of thought, eh? I was really going through the weeds. I was trying to sift through the weeds. Huh?
but I think what you were trying to say, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think what you're trying to get to is that so much of the way you interact with the world is based on how you internally feel about yourself.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah, it's that vision. That's another thing. It's that vision. Um, it's that vision that we have of ourselves. Like, and that's the thing I love about listening to Gabor Mate, and then also my Raj Yoga practice, because we do this thing that's called drishti, where you just look at the center of the person's forehead and you imagine a point of sparkling light. And it's a practice that we do whenever we're seeing someone. That's the goal. Always remember that the other person you're speaking with, they're a soul. And so I was thinking about drishti, and then what Gabor Mate was saying about childhood traumas, and how when we're growing up, we internalize things that we can't even like consciously remember. It might be a memory from when I was 18 months old, but I've internalized whatever it is that I take that thing to mean. Maybe it means, because for him, it was abandonment. The mom had to give him away for some weeks because he was born in like World War II, Nazi Germany, no, Nazi Hungary, I think. So it's extreme, right? But she was doing that to protect him. But as the kid, he saw it as mom doesn't want me anymore. So he was speaking about how he internalized that. He's very eloquent and deep person. Okay. But with drishti, there was this thought about how we must, drishti, it affects us. The accumulation of how people have seen us. And so how people see themselves, right? The accumulation of that, I guess the subject, the one who's being stared at with the vision of drishti, right? I take that on. Whatever drishti I receive from the outside world, I take it on and I believe it. It shapes me. And so I could have someone, a mom, who is doing her best to support me. But if she's constantly thinking about bills and stress and whatever, when she looks at me, maybe she doesn't have the emotional capacity to be present because she's thinking about all the stuff that she's afraid of. And so when she's looking at me, what am I experiencing as the kid? Maybe I'm experiencing that I'm not very interesting, I'm boring, right? And maybe mom is the only person who's at home who I'm always looking at, and I'm always receiving her drishti. And so because I've interpreted it that way for so many years of living with her, and I'm making this up, but maybe, right? But like maybe when I get to school, there's a feeling like I want to be the center of attention. I need people to see me. I need it. You know what I mean? I don't say that to myself, but that's what I feel I need. Or, there's so many different types of drishti. There's beautiful, positive drishti. That's the goal with Raj Yoga, to look at souls as souls so that we're respecting them. But it was making me think that vision actually has a huge impact on how we see ourselves, how people are seeing us. And if we don't have that strength of mind, that strength of self, of who we are and our inherent value as a foundation, then we're going to get sucked into all the different ways that people are viewing us, just because we don't have that strength to be like Teflon or whatever it's called, to, bounce, for it to bounce off of.
That could be as little as like maybe, I don't know, taking a cigarette from someone and smoking it because you want to fit in, or as big as, ending up with a life partner that is extremely harmful and doesn't make you feel good, but because subconsciously you think you deserve it, you stick it out, right? And it's true. It's just, you're right. It does pop up in a lot of ways. Maybe taking the cigarette is, I shouldn't say as small, because those do have lifelong implications, but just as a reference point.
No, I feel you. Yeah. But then that's also the other cool thing about drishti, is that reflective quality, is that if I'm proactively going out there and looking at people and seeing them as souls, then it's actually benefiting me, because how I view the world outside is how I view myself, and vice versa. So it's like working from the outside in to mend my own vision of myself, just seeing the beauty in everyone I'm able to speak with, even if they're not being very beautiful, you know what I mean?
But that's
Yeah.
lovely, being able to see that someone's authentically a human, like has a soul to them, because I think as you go through life and you interact with people and you're like, why would this person do this? Like 9 times out of 10, it doesn't really have much to do with you. It has so much to do with their own experiences and their own records and their own, how they feel about themselves. That the energy you're getting, you're like, oh, this. I mean, if you can see them as a soul and you can see them as a light and sort of separate, you understand that what you're receiving isn't actually a reflection of maybe how they feel about you or how they feel about this interaction. It actually might be a reflection of a lot more greater things that have been in your life. This happens to be the place to manifest in today, you know? And I think that's such an important thing to keep in, because that helps to not escalate situations, super random, but I have a dog, and I've gone to stores where I can't bring her in, so I have to leave her outside. So one time I had gone to the store and I just need to quickly pick up something out of the convenience store, but I couldn't bring her with me, and because of the time, I couldn't drop her off at home and come back. I didn't have the time, so I quickly just left her outside. Obviously tie her up, went in, I went to go grab the thing, and while I'm there, just this man person is yelling and screaming. Because I have my headphones and I live in the city, I was like, this is my mom walking away. And eventually, for a specific reason, I had to take my thing off. And I took
Your
my
headphone.
Yeah, my headphone off. And he's like, whose dog is that? Who's that? And I caught that. I was like, oh, it's my dog. And he was like, how dare you leave her out? She's barking. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I just have to quickly grab something and then take her out. I'm really sorry about that. He was flipping out. And I had to recognize in that moment that he probably wasn't as angry about the dog thing. It was something else that happened, because he literally had to leave his place, walk across the street to come yell at me in a shop mart when I was only in there for 5 minutes. You know what I mean? That level of commitment and that level of anger tells me that what you're giving me has nothing to do with the dog per se. It's just maybe that might be what it interrupted. It might be how it made you feel. It might be all these other factors. And I remember I was looking at him and being like, okay, I'm sorry about that, but I gotta grab this thing and I will be out and she'll be gone. And he walked, he just stood there and he kept yelling at me, and I was like, okay, phone back on, and kept walking. Because what am I supposed to do? If I match his energy, it's not gonna help the situation. I could also be like, hey, this is a dog friendly community. This cannot be the first time you've heard a dog bark. I hear dogs barking in this area everyone has a dog. You know what I mean? They leave them out. It's a very normal thing. So the fact that this dog is the one that made you decide to come in and get up and start screaming just says a lot about where you're at as a person. Could I have, provided the same energy? Yeah, but like that would have been beneficial. Um, so
You also have a very unique way of seeing things, I think. Um, I'm thinking about your birth chart now because you've got Saturn in Pisces, and like we were speaking about Venus, you've got Venus in Cancer, and they're both water signs. And water has to do with emotions, feelings. With Cancer, it's feelings that have to do with home, family, those that we consider to be like kin, close kin, those we really deeply care about, those who are in our inner circle. With Pisces, it's emotions, feelings that have to do with the world around us. And it's interesting, as you say that, it made me think about. I don't know, but it makes me think about older men maybe projecting things onto you, just because Saturn, the planet that is a signifier for older authority figures, is in, usually men also, is in like older male authority figures, is in the sign of Pisces, that's ruled by Neptune in modern astrology. And Neptune is all about illusions, media, art. It's the feelings and emotions of everyone on planet Earth. People, animals, insects, birds, plants, everything. And so it's beautiful because it's making a trine, your Venus and your Saturn. So it feels like you have this beautiful capacity to translate those feelings you have for those in your immediate community, and kind of generously share them in the way of not taking offense to the world at large, when maybe it's projecting something onto you in seeing you in a way that isn't actually accurate.
that's fair. I think that I do have an ability, and I am a very empathetic person. I do want to be honest, though. There have been times where I've like chosen violence instead. Like I've decided to scream.
You also Jupiter and Scorpio. That's also making the trine.
This is a very like I'm in a good place at that moment, so I was able to like understand that the energy was getting to really have much to do with me. But I've definitely been like, excuse me, I don't know if you're talking to me.